What's the most fucked up thing the US government has done? The Trail of Tears is pretty up there for most fucked up thing. Edit. Yes, I know slavery happened. I'm not arguing that this was worse, I just named the first thing that popped into my head. Back in the 50s and 60s, the US military tested several different biological weapons on an unbeknownst to the public. They specifically targeted low-income and poverty-stricken areas. They tested things from chemicals to viruses. It wasn't declassified till 10 years ago. Edit. Sources: https www.businessinsider.com Military Government Secret Experiments Biological Chemical Weapons 2016 9 https n.m.wikipedia.org Wiki Unethical Humane Experimentation in the United States https Priceonomics.com How the US government tested biological warfare on https www.psnews.com News admits bioweapons tests said it too. Why would they declassify it? Freedom of Information Act https n.m.wikipedia.org Wiki Freedom of Information Act United States, required them to disclose this. For years, so many people were arrested, disappeared and even dismissed as conspiracy theorists through this. I can also say that chemtrails aren't a thing. I work aerospace and the altitude that these planes are flying wouldn't do anything. Planes would be flying much lower like crop dusters in order to make any effect. It's literally vapor and exhaust coming from the planes, and some stay longer because of the different altitudes, temps and RH that they are flying. Edit 3, since people are still arguing to me for chemtrails. Here is the science that debunks it. https www.businessinsider.com Science says chemtrails not real 2016 8. I mean, there was the time the National Guard shot and killed coal miners and their families who were being horribly exploited by coal companies, so they were striking. See also, the Ludlow Massacre and the time they decided to routinely sterilize Native American women. And the Guatemala syphilis experiments. The silencing, embarrassing, and killing of Gary Webb. Gary Webb was an investigative journalist who proved that the CIA was selling massive amounts of drugs, particularly cocaine, to, typically black, poor neighborhoods all over the U.S. This was in order to fund an overthrow of the Nicaraguan government by US-friendly terrorists during the 90s. He was forced to resign, disgraced, blacklisted, divorced, and found dead with 2 bullets through his head in 2004. It was ruled a suicide despite the facts he owned no guns, and it being 2 bullets through the head in a suicide. The Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment. The CIA testing birth control on unsuspecting women in Puerto Rico. While this probably isn't the worst thing America has done since it didn't happen, but Operation Northwoods. This was a proposed false flag attack on US soil that would justify going to war with Cuba. It was rejected by Kennedy, but approved by every man before him. It's stuff like this that makes the whole 9/11 inside job conspiracy sound a little less wacky, because this was essentially the same thing. I'm sure that for every ducked up thing we know about there are even worse things that we don't. The involvement in various Latin American countries during the Cold War was pretty ducked up. https://n.wikipedia.org Wiki United States involvement in regime change in Latin America https://n.wikipedia.org Wiki Operation Condor. The things they haven't been caught for. Agent Orange, depleted uranium arms that polluted battlefields, people's homelands, and left generations of people with birth defects after the war was done. We overthrew a democratically elected government in Iran when the people didn't vote for who we wanted. Edit, down with the military-industrial complex. Great nations don't fight endless wars. Operation Wetback https://n.m.wikipedia.org Wiki Operation Wetback along the lines same ethics of the Japanese internment camps, but not as well known. The government has been trying to take away all privacy. https www.reddit.com Masterachi comments 2c4 This government wants to remove end-to-end medium Android app at source share. Currently, they are abusing the fact that the whole population is tunnel visioning on the corona pandemic to pass a highly controversial bill that will grant them access to every single phone call or message passed received on American soil, without warrant or court order. Edit. Okay guys, this comment officially has gained 50 times more upvotes than my most upvoted post. And first award ever too. Shite edit 2, source, credit to Whalevert for this, found this helpful summary of the bill, https cyberlaw.stanford.edu blog 202001 Earn It Act How Ban End-to-End Encryption Without Actually Banning It Actual Bill for Those That Can Read Law, Earn It Act 2020, https www.congress.gov 116 Bills 3398 Bills 116s 3398 is.xml edit 3, okay who is the crackhead who gave me plat? Sent me a letter telling me that I'd figured my taxes wrong. If they knew, why didn't they just do it for me? You want this chronological or alphabetical? Honestly, there's so many grotesquely ducked up things it's hard to pick just one. Not to mention there's so much that's classified, that honestly we don't know for sure. The thread is bound to mention stuff like slavery, Tuskegee, MKUltra, Trail of Tears, Iran-Contra, Jim Crow laws, Vietnam War, voter suppression, Operation Northwoods, the Patriot Act, pretending COVID is a hoax to short stock, bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki, executing mentally disabled criminals, and the list just goes on and on and on. How do you pick a most fucked up thing? I'm gonna go with not doing anything to stop the brutal lynching, rape and murder of African Americans up until the 60s. The Diego Garcia incident in the 1968, which is also one of the worst things the UK government has done. For the UK to continue purchasing nuclear missiles from America, they asked to rent out the British island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean to use as a naval base. The UK then subsequently sent soldiers onto the island, forced all of the inhabitants off of the island, killed anybody who resisted, destroyed all homes and killed all the animals so us soldiers could then turn the island into a naval base. Any ex-inhabitants who tried to speak out about the incident were immediately silenced and punished, and the details of the incident were only recently made public. The island is still a joint UKAS naval base to this day. Hard to rank them, but the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a U.S. false flag operation to establish the pretext to invade Vietnam to stop the spread of communism, leading to the absolutely useless deaths of millions of military and civilians only to have the U.S. pull out and cede control of the entire country to communist control. The most ducked up thing about it is that our government knew it was an unwinnable war, but we stayed there anyway, throwing more bodies on the pile. The news media kept a daily running count of us dead. The U.S. government measured success in terms of number of enemy dead. Boering and bombing of Black Wall Street. https://whowhatwe.org 20170601 Classic Day Americans bombed American City Air. Throwing citizens in internment camps during World War II. Shuffles deck picks card not doing anything about the AIDS epidemic. Gulf of Tonkin, and subsequently the Vietnam War. The incessant need to overthrow democratically elected socialist leaders and/or assassinating them and then planting fascist dictators in their place. Victims: Salvador Allende, murdered by US-backed coup in Chile; Patrice Lumumba, assassinated by CIA and DRC; Thomas Sankara, murdered by US French-backed coup in Burkina Faso; Jean-Bertrand Aristide, ousted by US-backed coup in Haiti. Anyone care to add to the list? There's lost more, I'm sure. Oh, and the US literally invaded the tiny island of Grenada in the Caribbean to take down a socialist government. Sad. I don't know, how about irradiating pregnant women, minorities, Hospital patients and your own ducking allies for a starter. https www.cvnews.co World US conducted secret radiation testing during Cold War. Author claims 1.3614858. The Dred Scott decision, involvement in the Vietnam War, Agent Orange, and slavery are the most ducked up that I can think of. The MKUltra LSD mind control experiments from the 1950s. The whole Iran-Contra affair was about as shady comes. But the US has a history of trying to overthrow governments for their own personal gain regardless of the cost in the country. Iraq, Iran, Vietnam, Grenada, Chile, Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, Panama, Samoa, Hawaii, Honduras, Cuba, Nicaragua, Mexico, Haiti, Dominican Republic, China, Greece, Costa Rica, Albania, Syria, Egypt, Guatemala, Indonesia, Lebanon, Laos, Brazil, Cambodia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Poland, El Salvador, Chad, Yugoslavia, Palestine, Libya, Yemen, Venezuela. The US is a violent nation and they're not content with keeping their violence to themselves, so they have to take it to other shores to force their way of life on others. Millions die so their government can make a profit. Can always count on Reddit to trash the US while China unleashed a pandemic in the current year. But yes, 100 to 150-year-old massacres are the same thing. Ruby Ridge. Google it. Here's Dick Cheney's Wikipedia page. https://n.wikipedia.org Wiki Dick Cheney. My Lai Massacre. https://n.m.wikipedia.org Wikimali Massacre in 1968. Hundreds of American troops, under the command of Lt. William Calley, entered the village of My Lai, Vietnam, encountering no resistance. Although there was no evidence, the American soldiers were convinced there were Viet Cong guerrillas hiding in the village. The soldiers herded over 500 unarmed villagers, including women, children, and infants, into ditches and shot them. Many of the women and children were raped on their way to the ditches, and there were reports of children having been shielded by their mothers from bullets, trying to escape from the pile of corpses, only to be immediately shot by Lt. Calley. Of the hundreds of Americans involved, only Lt. Calley was convicted, and for his 22 counts of murder he served just 3 years under house arrest.